Was Rahab once a planet in our solar system that exploded due to an ancient galactic war that took place before the inauguration of Adam and Eve? Could we even have elder siblings made in the image of God who never came to earth but are still part of the house of God? Will the Antichrist be a hybrid? And are we entering a post-human apocalypse that could threaten the very existence of mankind?
In which you have the King of Heaven, the right hand of God, who is vanquishing the dragon, piercing the dragon, and shattering this thing called Rahab. Read that last verse again, that last one that references Rahab.
You rule the raging of the sea. When its waves rise, you still them.
Pause. What does that mean? The raging of the sea. That's insurrection. Read the paragraph under that verse.
Stilling and ruling the raging sea are metaphors for quelling and subduing insurrection. The shattering of Rahab was the decisive blow that pierced the dragon and brought his rebellion to an abrupt and devastating end.
So now you have the full picture. You have the Son of God striding on a battlefield, and his robe is dipped in blood. And it gets even weirder.
Welcome to another video. Fasten your seatbelts, because today we are going to dive into some fascinating topics. Living in South Africa and coming from the prophetic background, most of my background is from the prophetic, supernatural. One of the most frustrating things, especially in South Africa, is the stuff I'm going to share with you, and the stuff that the individual that I'm going to share with you shares is in South Africa, you could not find any of this stuff. Even 5 years ago, as recently as 5 years ago, there was nobody, especially in the prophetic realms, there was nobody talking about stuff like this. Everything was just about, and I'm speaking specifically now in my own country, South Africa, most of it is about, echoing church doctrine and, things that is palatable for mainstream Christianity, and a lot of it mixed and convoluted with the old and the new, and there wasn't really anybody shifting the paradigm and really getting Christians to think deeper than just what's hidden on plain sight in the text. And as I've said in the previous video as well, the Bible is multi-dimensional, and the Bible is a fascinating work. It is actually it's a spiritual technology that was handed down from God to mankind, because it speaks to the youngest child and makes sense, but it also speaks to the deeper mystic and those that want to dive deeper into the mysteries of the kingdom. It's multi-dimensional. It has layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, and the more we grow in our spiritual search, or in our spiritual understanding, the more the Bible speaks to us. It is a multidimensional living letter to mankind. So my gift to you is I want to introduce you to a man that sort of added pieces to my puzzle that I was building. So the man I want to introduce you to is a man called Timothy Alberino. And man, I got so excited when I stumbled upon this man's work quite a while back. And he's written an amazing book, and we're going to look at that as well. It's called Birthright. One of the very interesting things that I found that Timothy Alberino sort of complemented what I believed, and I sounded crazy, like a nuthead, when a while back, I think over a year ago, when I put videos out there saying, I believe heaven has locality in our known universe. And Timothy Alberino believes that, and he explains it to greater length than what I can. Obviously we know that heaven is within. Jesus said, the Father and I will come and make our abode with you. But we cannot just leave it there. We cannot just look at that as a singularity and say, okay, that's it. Heaven is not just a state, or heaven is just not internal. We have to look at things like the microcosm, the macrocosm, as within, so without, popular New Age term or ancient spirituality term. So heaven, although heaven is within us, yes, that's the kingdom message, we cannot negate the fact that heaven is situated, it has location, it is a real place. Like Alberino emphasizes, Jesus is the Lord of armies. So heaven has a very structured armies, an army base that is very structured. There is ranking, there is structure, there is order, there's law, there's procedure, there's protocol, just with the military realm of heaven. And the Bible says Jesus is the Lord of armies. He's coming back physically. The angels said to the disciples, he will come back the way you see him ascend now, he will return in like manner. So just to say that, oh, heaven is now just within us, I can just ask a simple question that will completely make it sound ridiculous, because Jesus is coming back physically with the angels, with the armies of heaven, the Lord of armies. He's coming back with the saints. They're going to be riding on horses. Okay, it's not horses as the animal horses. That is just a prophetic or an allegorical picture of the vehicles that they will be returning in. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's not horses, it's not animals, horses. It's something far more profound than that. But anyway, let's park that for now. So now let me ask you the question: if heaven is only within us, is Jesus and the armies of heaven, are they going to come out of you? Obviously not. That's like completely ridiculous. So heaven has locality in our vast universe, and as within, so without, as without, so within, the microcosm, macrocosm. So heaven can have a multi-location. It can be within us, but it can also be out there in the macro universe. So that is what the book looks like. Birthright, the coming post-human apocalypse, and the usurpation of Adam's dominion on planet Earth. Alberino's insights into the biblical narrative will shatter your paradigm. I love that. I absolutely love that. If you really want your paradigm shifted, if you really want to take a deeper dive into what was actually happening right before Genesis even, but okay, let's just stick with the canon, Genesis to Revelation. This man is going to unpack it for you in a way like you have never heard it before. Like I say, being in South Africa, especially coming from a prophetic background, 5 years ago, there was no one talking about stuff like this. No one talking about it. Today, a lot of them are starting to come out now and touching on these subjects, but I guarantee you, I have been around, and I've been around, and there was no one talking about it. But yeah, like I say, we've reached that age of forced knowledge, with the internet, YouTube so readily available to us. It's easy for everybody to, dive into this stuff. And I really do plan on interviewing this man. I really do, in the near future, because that'll be something awesome, especially for my viewers. And I would love to interview him and really, pick his brain on a lot of these things, not just only this. He wrote another book as well. His latest work is a commentary on the Book of Enoch with some of his buddies, which called the Blurry Creatures podcast, I think it is. I'm speaking a correction. But also, I haven't got that one yet, but that is also a fascinating work. His commentary on Enoch, and he warns people that, it's really going to challenge the common biblical narrative on the Book of Enoch. So Timothy Alberino, who is known as the modern Indiana Jones, or the Indiana Jones of Christianity, and he's got a very fascinating story. He at a very young age, I think just after high school, he went and he lived in the Amazon jungle in Peru, where he discovered some very, very fascinating things there. And he's an enthusiast like we are on this channel, and he's had some supernatural encounters. He's done explorations on the megaliths and creatures that exist even in Peru, in the deep regions of the Amazon jungle, that, when you experience these things and a Christian or a pastor comes and says, oh, that's just a demon, or it's a spiritual demon, or it's a spirit entity from hell, whatever. How do you convince somebody that actually lived there? I think he lived there, 9 or 10 years. And even the stories he heard from, the local tribes there, they talk about these giants and they talk about these creatures that come out at night and all this type of stuff. And I know I'm frightening some of you now, but man, just get the book, read the book, check out his videos. It is going to blow you away. So And what I love about his work is he gives a very, very good explanation about extraterrestrials. And he talks about the elder race, that we have elder siblings in the house of God that are also in the image of God. We are not just the only beings that were created in the image of God. We come from a family, which he terms the elder race. I know Dr. Heiser calls it the divine council. We originate from the house of God, but there are still beings that are created in the image of God that never came to earth. And the question, the controversial questions that pops up from mainstream Christians is, so are you saying that there's beings that are more special than us? Well, the redemptive work of Christ Jesus was for us, for humanity. He came to redeem the Son of Man. And obviously that would have had a positive effect on our elder siblings, because if Jesus didn't redeem us, who knows what might have happened. There might have been another massive a galactic war that breaks out. And so, everything is definitely, the audience is directed towards what's happening on planet Earth. Absolutely. We cannot minimize that. As human beings, as a son of man, on planet Earth, we definitely do have some profound and unique purpose in the plan of God, that Jesus, the second member of the Trinity, would come down to die for us and redeem us. But that does not mean that we do not have elder siblings that are created in the image of God as well, but did not come to earth. Now, he appeared on a podcast, a very famous podcaster's channel. I think it's The Deep Things with Taylor Welsh. And so we're going to touch on some of the points there, and he's really going to unpack it for us. And we asked, was Rahab a planet that existed in our solar system and exploded due to an ancient galactic war that took place? And also, extraterrestrials, do we have elder siblings in the house of God that are also created in the image of God, but were not necessarily sent to earth? I know it hurts, I know it, but allow him to unpack it for you, and really pay close attention to what he says, because you really might learn something profound that could help you in your search for the deeper things.
The prevailing perception among Christians and among, I would say, the general public, when thinking about the biblical worldview, is that human beings, mankind, is the center of the universe, that this is the biblical narrative, that mankind is the center of the universe. Everything is happening, this is our story, and all the other characters in our story are ancillary. We're the main character, human beings. This is called the anthropocentric perspective of the universe. Turns out that's not the biblical worldview. That's not the correct biblical perspective. The correct biblical perspective is called a Christocentric perspective. Christ is the center of the universe, not us. It's his story. And we're ancillary characters in his story. And there's a lot of other players in the game besides us. And when we show up, when you open up Genesis and you have, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. People think that is the beginning, the creation of the universe, and that in the anthropocentric perspective, that the earth came into being with the universe and mankind with the earth. That is not accurate. And how do we know that that's not accurate from a biblical perspective? Because in Job, we read that when the foundations of the earth were laid, when God was forming or reforming the earth, the sons of God, the B'nai Elohim, shouted for joy. And these sons of God are very intelligent beings. These are not, they're not puppets or something like this in the kingdom of heaven. This is a civilization. The sons of God are members of a divine family. And they're shouting for joy when the earth is being created or reformed. And this is happening, this is the pretext to the creation of mankind. This is the preamble. So they're in existence first. That's why I call them in my book our elder siblings. The angelic race, I denominate as our elder siblings, the elder race. And so the idea is that there's an entire history, eons of untold history, preceded the creation of mankind. We're coming late in the game. We show up late in the game on the timeline of history. And I think this is all, and I make this case in my book, Birthright, and I think that this is all very apparent. When you detach yourself from that anthropocentric perspective, you remove yourself from the hub of the wheel, as it were, and you place Christ at the center of the universe. And we are one of the characters in his story. And there are other characters. We know that there are other characters. We read, for example, in the Hebrew Old Testament, we read about the cherubim. We read about there was an entity in Eden with Adam and Eve. And that entity is not a talking snake. I am of the persuasion, by the way, that the Garden of Eden is an allegory. I don't read that literally. I think it's an allegory.
Okay.
And it's not a talking snake, and it's not an apple. This is a being, a very intelligent entity with whom Adam and Eve are conversing. And as I said, in this context, we are the younger sibling. We were created to be members of a family, of a divine family. That's why we were made in the image and likeness of God. But we're not the only ones, by the way, who bear the image of God. Our siblings bear the image of God also. And I know I'm getting way ahead of myself here.
No, that's great.
But there's this assumption that only the human species bears the image of God, that we possess some unique qualities that no other creatures in the universe have, that we are rational beings, that we are emotional beings, that we have this ability to think creatively and to create, and we assume, and there's no reason to assume this, but we assume that we're it, that there's God and then there's us in regard to beings that are made in his image. That's not true. The Bible never says that only man was made in the image of God. That's a fallacy. And clearly we have these other entities in the picture, in the story, who pre-exist us, and who are more intelligent than we are.
What is it is there anything that makes humans special?
Yes.
Is
the
it
gospel
bodies?
of Christ.
Okay, got it.
That God sent his only begotten Son to die for us. He became us in order to redeem us. He's our kinsman redeemer. The Bible says that he did not help the angels. He came for us. And so the story of the gospel, it's unique to the human species in that the Son of God became a man to redeem mankind. And that makes us very special in this equation.
Got it.
But we are certainly not the brightest and the best in regard to our capabilities.
What about way back then? Like, so Adam and Eve are put here. Well, I'm going to table that question. What was happening before the chaos of the earth was put back together? Like there was a war in the cosmos, and I get the sense that something on the earth was already here when that war was happening, correct?
Well, going back to the beginning of Genesis, we find a world that is what I believe the scene when you open up again Genesis, the book of Genesis, first and second verses of Genesis. What we have is a world that is in a state of ruination. The earth is in a state of ruination, in my opinion, post-judgment.
Okay.
And so we're looking at a world that has experienced an unimaginable cataclysm. And this is the opening scene. And that cataclysm occurred as a result of something else that happened in the cosmos before mankind was created. Indeed, I would say that part of the reason why we were created, that you cannot disconnect us from what pre-exists us. We were created in the sequence of time, and part of the purpose that we were created was to remedy something that had happened previous to our existence. And so the Bible opens up with a world that is reeling in the wake of cataclysm. And it's a scene of ruination. And that gets very detailed. There's the first and second verses of Genesis are in the beginning. As I said earlier, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. But I don't think that that's the best rendering of those verses. And we don't have to go down this path because it gets very technical. But I think you can render the first and second verses of Genesis in the following way: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Full stop. Period. That's the initial creation. Then verse 2, but, not and, but, the earth became desolate and empty, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. That's a different story, is it not? That's a different story.
Different.
But the earth became desolate and empty. And so, what would cause this desolation? Well, the answer is in the scriptures. Insurrection in the kingdom of heaven. So there was this event that happened in which a particular being who's never actually named in the Bible, he's alluded to with various monikers, such as the devil, Satan, that's serpent of old, the dragon, but he's never actually named. And there's a misnomer. The name Lucifer is actually a misnomer that comes from the Latin Vulgate, Jerome's translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. And so Jerome derives the name Lucifer, which means light bearer, or shining one, or bright star. But the point is that he's a morning star. And this is the other word that's associated with what I call the elder race, with these sons of God, the B'nai Elohim, morning stars. Why are they called morning stars? Because they're the first to have appeared in the universe. And they have a whole history of their own that unfolded in the universe before we show up on the scene. And it's this what I call a galactic rebellion that happens, that occurs as the preamble of our story. And so we're picking up the story when you open your Bible, when you open the Hebrew Old Testament, and you begin to read the book of Genesis. This is a new page being turned, a new chapter, but it's not chapter 1.
Right.
It's our chapter begins in Genesis. So when you begin to think about the Bible, when you have this, call it a galactic paradigm of the biblical narrative, it starts to break apart your presumptions. It starts to break apart your paradigm, and it forces it to expand, because now the story isn't just about us. The focus isn't us, it's Christ, and there's something way bigger happening in the background.
Yeah. Okay. Are you okay? Let's go.
So much of it is awesome.
Let's go deeper. And then, so I know that you're a researcher who's very good at what you do. So if people want to research this, they can buy the book. But I just want to talk about your you mentioned certain like clues to this, almost that if his name is not Lucifer or whoever it was, almost being he was going between different like elder races, and you make almost the case that there were elder races on different planets.
Yes. This character, who's never actually named, I always liken him to Voldemort from Harry Potter series, He Who Shall Not Be Named.
Yeah.
His name is never spoken. We're never told. Now, he's alluded to in various places. But he was obviously a prince in the kingdom. Mm-hmm. So there's something called, there's an idea, and I didn't know it at the time when I was writing Birthright. I thought this was an original thought to me. Turns out it's not.
Nice.
It's called the Plurality of Worlds concept.
Okay.
And so for example, when we see Jesus returning and he has written on his thigh, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, what we think is, he's the king of all the human kings, all the earthly kings, and the Lord of all the earthly lords. I think there's something much deeper being expressed in this title. These are titles of regency.
Yeah.
King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I think that what we're looking at here is something that resembles an empire.
Yeah.
That there are many kingdoms, terrestrial and extraterrestrial. And the Son of God is King and Lord over all.
Right.
And we know that this is the case because in the Bible we encounter these angelic beings being described as princes. They're princes. And in fact, Jesus is called the Prince of Princes in the Old Testament. And so princes, what do princes do? What is the function of a prince? They govern.
Right.
Indeed, we use the term principality. Mm-hmm. Now, that term is not directly found in the Bible. That's a translation of archon. But the idea is in the Bible. A principality is a realm governed by a prince.
Got it.
Now, there's two ways to look at this, and I think both are simultaneously correct. One is what's called a Deuteronomy 32 worldview, and the late Dr. Michael Heiser popularized this view, in which the nations were disinherited by Yahweh at Babel, at the Tower of Babel. God disinherits the nations, and he turns them over to the sons of God, the B'nai Elohim. Mm-hmm. And in Heiser's view, and I agree with this, those are not human beings. He turns them over to lesser gods, to members of the elder race. And yes, those would also be considered princes. Remember, the Prince of Persia, when Daniel's praying, and there's an emissary sent to Daniel, and the Prince of Persia intercepts this emissary. I believe it's Gabriel, and Michael has to intervene.
Come save him,
And so there's that princes in that sense, that there are non-human princes on earth, but I think it's bigger than that. Because remember, these guys pre-exist us. What were they doing in the universe before we showed up? They weren't playing harps and sitting on clouds. And this is the salient point here. When you talk about the elder race, when you talk about these exceedingly intelligent beings that pre-exist us, what we're talking about is a civilization, an extraterrestrial civilization
that they were governing.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were doing the kinds of things that we do here on Earth, but not here. And this is sort of a qualm that people have when they encounter my work, because, again, from the anthropocentric perspective, the human-centric perspective, it's difficult for people to accept within the biblical worldview the concept of extraterrestrials. They think that is some sort of a secular, or they think that is for whatever reason a secular worldview. It's not really associated with a biblical worldview, but it is absolutely a biblical worldview. In fact, I say that the biblical narrative presumes the existence of extraterrestrial beings. And I'll go back to Job, where the sons of God are shouting for joy. They're not on earth shouting for joy. They're watching something happen on earth. They're spectating from somewhere else. And so when you talk about extraterrestrials, which really you have to in the context of this conversation, you have to define terms, and the term extraterrestrial simply means a being. Let's put it let's talk specifically about sentient beings, because you can talk about microbes, right, on Mars or something. Let's be specific to sentient beings. Extraterrestrial is a being, a sentient being, whose provenance, whose origin is not planet Earth. That's it. That's what an extraterrestrial. So then if we consult the biblical narrative and we ask the question, does the biblical narrative confirm the existence of extraterrestrial beings? The answer is unequivocally yes.
Yeah.
Unequivocally yes. Well, then that means that there are extraterrestrial worlds. There must be. And now, and here, this is where people get caught in the weeds, because they start to say, well, it's not extraterrestrial, there's extra dimensions. They go that route. And and people seem to think that that's somehow more kosher
believable
for a Christian to say, no, I don't believe in extra terrestrial worlds, but I will accept extra dimensional worlds, or quote unquote spiritual worlds. But here's the problem I have with that, and I'll take a break. I'm dominating this conversation.
That's great. Great. That's why you're here.
But here's my problem with that. We have really, really good telescopes. Mm-hmm. And I was looking through one a couple years ago, and it was remarkable. My neighbor has he works for the university, and he was setting up dialing in a telescope for them, a really expensive telescope for the university. And he was in his yard, and he's got it all dialed in. He knocked on my door, and he wanted to know if me and my sons wanted to come look at it while he's got it dialed in. And we went out there, and it was remarkable. I mean, I looked through this telescope, and I wasn't expecting to see what I saw. I saw Mars so clearly, and I mean, people who have nice telescopes, this is, they do this all the time, but I had never looked through a really good telescope. So you look up in the sky, and you see this very bright object in the sky, and it looks like a star. As soon as you put your eye into that eyepiece in the telescope, that's not a star. It's the planet Mars, the red planet Mars, just like you see on the NASA photos.
Yeah.
So what you think is a star, it's just some bright object in the sky. You look through the telescope, and you're looking at the red planet of Mars. And then we looked at Jupiter, and we looked at Saturn, and you could see the moons, some of the moons around these planets on this telescope. And So and what I'm getting at here is it always confounds me that so many Christians who approach this topic say, no, there's nothing extraterrestrial. There's no extraterrestrial worlds. It's interdimensional or spiritual. But get a telescope and look at the planet Mars. That's a world.
Yeah.
Like the Earth is a world. That's a world, and that's one of billions.
Right.
And you're going to tell me that there's no use for any of those? It's just the Earth? Absolutely not.
Yeah, 100%.
The universe could be teeming with life. And there's nothing anti-biblical about that concept whatsoever.
Time for a breather. Now, for the sake of the length of this video, I cannot add everything in here. The podcast is, I think, over an hour. I'll have a link in the description for you to go and check it out. And I highly encourage you to go watch that for you enthusiasts. And if you want to stick with the Sunday school narrative, then no, do not watch it, all right? But this is for the enthusiasts, the people like me that want to seek out the deeper things. So Rahab could have been a planet that exploded due to an ancient galactic war that took place, an insurrection from the kingdom of darkness to, with the kingdom of light, with heaven. We read about it in Revelation. The dragon warred with the heavenly hosts. And this is the thing that he mentions as well. This war that Lucifer and his armies, this war that the kingdom of darkness has, is not a war against mankind. It's not even a war against Israel. See, this is where the misconception comes in. This is not even a war with the nation of Israel. They are warring against God, against the host of heavens. They are warring against the Lord of armies. It's a war against God. And he goes on in further detail about the Antichrist, who he believes is going to be a hybrid being that he's going to try and imitate the birth of Jesus Christ. He's going to be half son of man, half Nephilim. But because he was born from the womb of a woman, it would give him the right to have dominion over planet Earth. That was the birthright. That's what the book's called, the birthright. So he would be able to claim the birthright of the son of man, Adam, and attempt to take over the world, and eventually a war with God himself. And that is why he says in Revelation, it says, no one was worthy to open the scroll. But there was one, the Son of Man, because although humanity, and he goes in great length in the book, and as well as in his videos, is that mankind is eventually going to be threatened by extinction. The human race is going to reach a place where it would be threatened by extinction. And luckily, there is a Son of Man seated at the right hand of God, fully man. And he is worthy to open the scroll and redeem mankind from giving over their birthright to the serpent and to his Antichrist. So, yeah, I'm going to wrap this video up. So go and have a look at it. Like I say, the link's in the description. Timothy Alberino. I'm really going to try and see if I cannot have a podcast interview with him in the near future. And it's going to absolutely be amazing. So let me know what you think in the comments. And yeah, so check it out.